As we near the end of this quadratics unit and the end of our grade 10 course, we now have a lot more understanding and knowledge about quadratic relations than we did when we previously looked at telling me everything you know. So we're going to look at some strategies on how we can find key features and key points of a parabola, depending on which form of the equation you are given to start with. Okay, so when you have a question and I ask you to tell me everything you know, you need to find the x and y intercepts. You need to find the vertex, the axis of symmetry, direction of opening, vertical stretch factor, all of those kinds of things. So mainly what we're going to talk about with these strategies is how to go kind of between the three key forms and how you can tell key points from those. Okay, so obviously you can tell the vertical stretch factor and the direction of opening from both, from all three forms of the equation. And then like the things like the axis of symmetry and your max or min value, you can tell from the vertex numbers as well. So we're just going to talk about how to find x-intercepts, y-intercepts, and vertex from all three forms of the equation. Okay, so if we start with factored form, which is y equals a, x minus r, x minus s, the most logical thing to determine first would be the x-intercepts, okay, because they're stated explicitly for you in the equation. So first I would find the x-intercepts, and you can do this, right, they're given by r0 and s0. Okay, so you can either just look at the equation and flip the signs if they are like just nice, like x plus something, x minus something, or you let each bracket equal 0 and solve for x. Okay, and that's more so when you've got like a fractional x-intercept, but it works for both ways. Okay, so this isn't to say that you have to find that first, but it makes most sense to find the x-intercepts first when you are given the factored form. Then what you find next doesn't really matter. You could call this step 2 or step 3 because, like I said, it's not like it's like you have to find all these things in the order. This order is just kind of what makes most sense from my point of view, but something else might make more sense to you. So next, I would find the vertex. Okay, and you do this from finding your axis of symmetry, right? So x is equal to r plus s over 2, right? Because we already found the x-intercepts. Then you can sub in x to find your y value. Or you technically could expand this, like you could expand your factored form to standard form first, and then you could use ybuddy or completing the square to get the vertex, but that's just what makes most sense to me. Okay, so then next 2 or 3, and the last thing that you need to find is your y-intercept. Okay, and the easiest way for me to find that is just when you're in factored form, I just let x equal 0 and find y. Okay, or you could expand to standard form. That's especially important for what you would choose. If the question's asking you to state the equation in standard form, then you would want to do that. Otherwise, it's just easiest to let x equal 0 in your factored form and calculate. Okay, so like I said, these steps here are interchangeable because this is just kind of like a suggestion for the best order to find things. But the lovely thing about quadratics is that now at this point we have so many different strategies to go back and forth between forms, that if that's not the form you like, then you can do something else. Okay, like you could even, I don't know, if you maybe you look at this and you don't even realize that the x-intercepts are there, that's fine. You could expand it to standard form first. You could use quadratic formula to get the x-intercepts. So even if your way is like longer than the method I would choose and maybe doesn't make as much sense to me, it's still fine. And as long as you're getting the key points, then that is totally fine. Okay, if you start with vertex form of the equation, so y equals a x minus h squared plus k. The thing that logically makes the most sense to find is the vertex because it's stated for you in the question, or sorry, in the equation. Okay, so you just read it from your equation, right? We know the vertex is given by hk, so you remember your x lies, you're going to flip the sign here, and then k just stays the same. Okay, believe it or not, so many times when I give an equation in vertex form and I ask the students to find the vertex, um, unbelievably so, I had so many students who would expand this to standard form. Then they would factor it or use completing the square or y-buddy, which makes no sense because especially if you expand this and then use completing the square, you're putting it right back into this form. Okay, so I know we just learned those two new skills and it's great to want to practice them, but don't make your life more difficult. Work smarter, not harder. Please do not go from vertex form, expand to standard, and then complete the square to get your vertex because that's just a waste of everybody's time. Okay, read it from the equation, h and k. Um, the next thing that I would find likely would be the x-intercepts. So we looked at this the other day. So you would let y equals 0 in your vertex form and solve for x. Okay, or you could expand to standard form and then factor or use the quadratic formula. Again, lots of options here, so it's pretty flexible with what you do. And then the third thing that I would find would be the y-intercept. And again, there's two ways you can do this. You can either let x equal 0 and solve for y, or you can just expand to standard form and use your c value. Okay, and again, these steps are like steps 2 and 3 are interchangeable. Really, all of them are interchangeable, but this is just, again, a logical list of what makes most sense. If you think something makes more sense to you, then by all means write out your own steps so that you know, like, if I'm presented with an equation in this form, this is what order I would find everything in. But again, if your order is different than somebody else's, that's fine, as long as you get all of the key points that you are asked to find. Okay, so then the last thing that we would look at, the last form is standard form. So y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. For me, logically, the first thing I would find would be the y-intercept, okay, because it's just the c value of your equation. So you can either just state it as c or it's as a coordinate, it's 0, c. Okay, so that's easy to tell, but again, just because it's the easiest one to use does not mean it always is logically for some people what they find first. What I would find next would be, for me, I would find the x-intercepts next, just because I like factoring. So I would do this by either factor um, or using quadratic formula. If you can't factor or if you just prefer the quadratic formula, that's fine. You can use it in place of factoring. Unless the question is actually asking you to factor. Okay, so x-intercepts, and then last I would find the vertex. And there's a few ways you can do this, right? So you can either use the y-buddy method, or you can complete the square, or if you already found the x-intercepts, then you can find the axis of symmetry right from your x-intercepts. Sub it in, right? So that was one of the ways we learned as well. And again, these steps 2 and 3, really steps, like all of them are interchangeable, but steps 2 and 3 are especially interchangeable. So again, it's just kind of like a matter of whatever makes most sense to you, but you just want to make sure that like when I give you a question and ask you to tell me everything you know, that you recognize what form it's starting from and you know what key information to pull from that, and then you're confident with at least one of the methods to go back and forth between different forms so that you can determine all of the key information. Okay, so the nice thing about these types of questions, the tell me everything you know questions, is that we looked at a question like this on the test. We already practiced telling me everything you know last unit. The difference here, and the nice thing is that we have more skills under our belt now, right? We've learned some new methods of going between forms, of determining things. from different forms. So it just means you've got more tools in your toolbox, more methods that you can use if you find something that you like better. But we've already done this type of question. Okay, so there's some practice questions in today's work that you can do. There's a question from each different form, so you can practice um, determining everything from each of the three forms. And yeah, like I said, make your own list of steps if you want to, but these are just, to me, what is logically the best order to find all of your key points from each of the three forms of a quadratic relation.